The Prohibition, also called the Dry Era, was a really terrible idea. Here's why. For those who don't know, the Prohibition was a period of time between 1920 and 1930 when the sale and consumption of alcohol was completely illegal. And straight up, making something like alcohol entirely illegal has never really gone well. I mean, just look at the first Bible story. Eve ate the apple because her natural curiosity took hold. But I digress. The goal of the Prohibition was to lessen alcohol consumption so folks would spend more money on food, clothes, houseware, etc. Obviously, it didn't work because alcohol was legal. In fact, it did more wrong than good. The Prohibition went national in 1920 with the 18th American Amendment, but by then there were 33 states with their own laws. Since America was recovering from World War I, the factories were switching back to making their same old pre-war products, which, lo and behold, included alcohol. The ex-soldiers were getting their old jobs back at distilleries, factories, theaters, restaurants, and a bunch of other places that relied on alcohol sales to stay open. Before the 18th Amendment, there were some restrictions on booze, but they were pretty weak. You know, a license, an age limit, but not well enforced. So, almost everywhere was a good place to get a drink. But when they couldn't sell alcohol anymore, they pretty much all shut down. That resulted in thousands, if not more, Americans losing their jobs all at once, and they wonder why the Depression was so dreadful. Not only was it devastating for the average citizen, it was also catastrophic for government funds. In some states, like New York, alcohol sales made up about 70% of all taxes collected. Without that, the government had to resort to extreme budget cuts, resulting in prisons and law enforcement being underfunded. By the end of the Prohibition, the American government had lost a total of $6.3 billion. $6 billion from tax revenue and $300 million from trying to enforce the laws that they made. As I just mentioned, during this period, law enforcement and prisons were grossly underfunded, which was a ginormous problem considering the massive increase in violent crime. Rates of homicide, robbery, and assault were through the roof. The underfunded, overcrowded prisons were nearly inhumane to their holders. But wait, you may be thinking, didn't the general crime rates decrease? To which I say, yes. The rates of minor crime, such as public swearing and vagrancy, dropped substantially in the 1920s and 30s. But I feel like the decrease in some folks saying in public is not very comparable to the inordinate amount of dead bodies they found. Organized crime also went nuts in this period because black market liquor became extremely popular. Spirits such as vodka and whiskey, as well as stronger versions of more common booze such as fortified wine, were quite easy to come by if you had the right connections, although they were unimaginably expensive. Al Scarface Capone was one of, if not the most famous gangsters of this time. Known for selling alcohol, running gambling and drug rings, prostitution of his women, and a whole lot more. He was the man to find if you wanted to partake in any sinful behavior. Another point is that a gargantuan number of Americans died due to unsafe supply. Since the alcohol was illegal, there was no guarantee that it wouldn't be laced with poisons and toxins, whether intentional or not. So, with all this, I think I got my point across. The Prohibition was a stupid idea that backfired horribly. But why should you care? Well, it's because we're still in a prohibition. I'm sure you've heard a little thing called the war on drugs. Maybe you went through the DARE program. But even if you haven't, I'm certain you've been affected by it. There are videos online of folks in crisis that we're supposed to point and laugh at because a junkie's going crazy. And some users need those substances to function in their day-to-day life. For example, I have ADHD. I have a prescription for a stimulant called methylphenidate. I might not have been able to make this without it due to lack of focus. So, if someone with undiagnosed ADHD uses another stimulant, let's say methamphetamines, in order to focus, is that truly a bad person? Does that person deserve to have their form of medication taken away so they can recover? I don't think so. The unsafe supply of these substances results in unnecessary deaths. The stigma around using them results in folks hating themselves or being dependent on them to get through life. If we legalize them with restrictions, we can decrease the risk of unsafe supply, unsafe use, and unsafe people. That is why the 1920s prohibition matters now. It's a perfect example as to why the war on drugs makes no sense. It shows the flaws in making anything completely off limits. Humans are naturally curious and defiant creatures. Show us a safe way to do things, we'll do it. But tell us we can never do it, we'll figure out a way to anyway. Stop fear-mongering and start actually presenting facts.